NFPA 70E, the standard for electrical safety in the workplace, and the NEC, or National Electrical Code, are distinct standards. NFPA 70E focuses on electrical safety practices for employees who are working on or near electrical equipment. It provides guidelines that include personal protective equipment, often referred to as PPE, safe work practices, and training protocols. The NEC, in contrast, focuses on the installation, maintenance, and the proper use of electrical equipment and systems. Its main goal is to minimize electrical hazards through proper installation and maintenance. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, plays a role by enforcing the NEC as a minimum safety requirement. However, OSHA also has the ability to adopt other standards, including NFPA 70E, as voluntary guidelines. These guidelines can then be used by employers to assist them in meeting OSHA's own requirements for workplace safety. To clarify, OSHA has not formally adopted NFPA 70E as a regulation. However, it does recognize the standard as a very valuable resource when it comes to electrical safety. As a result, many employers choose to voluntarily use NFPA 70E. This helps them to enhance their electrical safety programs and also to comply with OSHA's General Duty Clause, which mandates that they provide a safe workplace for their employees. In terms of coverage, NFPA 70E applies to all qualified electrical workers. These are individuals who are trained and skilled in working on electrical equipment. This includes electricians who follow the guidelines set forth by the NEC. However, it is important to note that NFPA 70E can also extend to other non-electricians who may work on or near electrical equipment. This could include maintenance personnel and construction workers, depending on their tasks and potential exposure to electrical hazards. So, to summarize, NFPA 70E can indeed cover electricians who follow the NEC, as it applies broadly to all qualified electrical workers. While OSHA has not formally adopted NFPA 70E as a regulation, employers frequently use it on a voluntary basis. This allows them to strengthen their electrical safety programs and ensure they are meeting the requirements of OSHA's General Duty Clause, which aims to maintain a safe working environment. Let's delve a little deeper into some specific aspects of these standards and their practical applications. Firstly, let's consider the personal protective equipment requirements under NFPA 70E. This standard provides detailed guidance on the types of PPE that are necessary for different electrical tasks and voltage levels. This could include things like arc-rated clothing, insulated gloves, face shields, and footwear. The selection of the appropriate PPE is crucial to protect workers from potential electrical hazards such as arc flash and electric shock. Secondly, safe work practices are a cornerstone of NFPA 70E. These practices include things like lockout-tagout procedures, establishing an electrically safe work condition, and using insulated tools. The standard emphasizes the importance of energizing electrical equipment whenever possible before any work is performed. When de-energizing is not feasible, NFPA 70E provides guidelines for working on or near energized equipment safely. Thirdly, training is a key element of NFPA 70E compliance. The standard requires that employees who work on or near electrical equipment receive adequate training to understand the hazards involved and the safe work practices that must be followed. This training should cover topics such as electrical safety principles, hazard recognition, and the proper use of PPE. Now, turning our attention to the NEC, this code provides comprehensive requirements for the safe installation and maintenance of electrical systems. This covers a wide range of topics, including wiring methods, overcurrent protection, grounding, and equipment installation. The NEC is updated every 3 years to reflect the latest technological advancements and safety practices. One important aspect of the NEC is its focus on overcurrent protection. This refers to the use of circuit breakers and fuses to protect electrical circuits from excessive current flow, which can lead to overheating and fires. The NEC specifies the appropriate size and type of overcurrent protection for different circuits based on their ampacity and application. Another key area covered by the NEC is grounding. Proper grounding is essential to minimize the risk of electric shock and to provide a path for fault current to flow back to the source, causing the overcurrent protection device to trip. The NEC provides detailed requirements for grounding electrodes, grounding conductors, and equipment grounding. In addition to these technical requirements, the NEC also addresses safety-related topics such as arc flash hazard warnings. The code requires that electrical equipment be marked with warnings to alert qualified personnel to the potential for arc flash hazards. This helps to ensure that workers are aware of the risks and take appropriate precautions. Now let's consider how OSHA interacts with these standards. While OSHA enforces the NEC as a minimum safety requirement, it also uses NFPA 70E as a guidance document for electrical safety. OSHA's General Duty Clause requires employers to provide a workplace that is free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to employees. In the context of electrical safety, this means that employers must take steps to protect their employees from electrical hazards such as shock, arc flash, and electrocution. Employers can demonstrate compliance with the General Duty Clause by following the guidelines in NFPA 70E. Even though OSHA has not formally adopted NFPA 70E as a regulation, the agency often references the standard in its enforcement activities. For example, OSHA may issue citations to employers who fail to provide adequate PPE or training to their employees, even if there is no specific OSHA regulation that requires it. In these cases, OSHA may rely on NFPA 70E as evidence that the employer failed to exercise reasonable care to protect its employees. It is also worth noting that some states have adopted NFPA 70E as a mandatory regulation. In these states, employers are legally required to comply with the standard, and failure to do so can result in fines and penalties. Therefore, it is important for employers to check with their state's occupational safety and health agency to determine whether NFPA 70E is a mandatory requirement in their jurisdiction. In summary, while the NEC focuses on the safe installation and maintenance of electrical systems, NFPA 70E focuses on the electrical safety practices that employees must follow when working on or near electrical equipment. OSHA enforces the NEC as a minimum safety requirement and uses NFPA 70E as a guidance document for electrical safety. Employers can demonstrate compliance with OSHA's General Duty Clause by following the guidelines in NFPA 70E. So, understanding the distinct roles of NFPA 70E, the NEC, and OSHA is crucial for ensuring electrical safety in the workplace. By following the requirements and recommendations of these standards, employers can protect their employees from electrical hazards and create a safer working environment. Let's further elaborate on the practical aspects of implementing NFPA 70E in the workplace. Firstly, it's essential to conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify potential electrical hazards. This assessment should consider factors such as voltage levels, equipment conditions, and the types of tasks performed by employees. The results of the risk assessment will help to determine the appropriate PPE and safe work practices that are necessary to protect workers. Secondly, employers should develop a written electrical safety program that outlines the procedures and policies for working on or near electrical equipment. This program should be based on the requirements of NFPA 70E and should be tailored to the specific hazards and conditions of the workplace. The electrical safety program should also address topics such as lockout, tagout, arc flash hazard analysis, and emergency response procedures. Thirdly, it's important to provide regular training to employees on electrical safety. This training should cover topics such as hazard recognition, safe work practices, and the proper use of PPE. The training should be tailored to the specific tasks that employees perform and should be updated regularly to reflect changes in technology and safety practices. In addition to these general measures, there are also some specific requirements in NFPA 70E that employers should be aware of. For example, the standard requires that employees perform an arc flash hazard analysis to determine the potential arc flash incident energy levels at various locations in the workplace. This analysis is used to select the appropriate arc-rated clothing and PPE for workers who may be exposed to arc flash hazards. NFPA 70E also requires that employers establish an electrically safe work condition before any work is performed on electrical equipment. This involves de-energizing the equipment, verifying that it is de-energized, and applying lockout tagout devices to prevent it from being inadvertently re-energized. The standard also provides guidelines for working on or near energized equipment safely. This includes using insulated tools and equipment, maintaining safe working distances, and using barriers to prevent accidental contact with energized parts. It's important to note that NFPA 70E is a consensus standard, which means that it is developed and maintained by a committee of experts representing a variety of stakeholders. This helps to ensure that the standard is based on the best available knowledge and practices. However, it's also important to be aware that NFPA 70E is not a static document. The standard is updated every 3 years to reflect changes in technology, safety practices, and industry experience. Therefore, employers should regularly review and update their electrical safety programs to ensure that they are consistent with the latest version of NFPA 70E. In addition to NFPA 70E, there are other standards and regulations that may be relevant to electrical safety in the workplace. For example, the NEC provides requirements for the safe installation and maintenance of electrical systems, while OSHA's electrical safety regulations cover a variety of topics such as wiring methods, grounding, and equipment installation. Employers should be familiar with all of the applicable standards and regulations and should take steps to ensure that their workplaces are in compliance. Overall, implementing NFPA 70E in the workplace requires a comprehensive approach that includes risk assessment, written programs, training, and adherence to specific requirements. By taking these steps, employers can protect their employees from electrical hazards and create a safer working environment. Let's consider some practical examples of how NFPA 70E might be applied in different situations. Firstly, imagine an electrician who is working on a 480-volt motor control center. Before beginning any work, the electrician would need to de-energize the equipment and verify that it is de-energized using a voltage tester. The electrician would also need to apply lockout-tagout devices to prevent the equipment from being inadvertently re-energized. Once the equipment is de-energized, the electrician would need to wear appropriate PPE such as arc-rated clothing, insulated gloves, and a face shield. The specific type of PPE would depend on the potential arc flash incident energy level at the location where the work is being performed. While working on the equipment, the electrician would need to use insulated tools and maintain safe working distances from any energized parts. The electrician would also need to be aware of the potential for arc flash hazards and take steps to minimize the risk of an arc flash. Secondly, consider a maintenance worker who is troubleshooting a 120-volt lighting circuit. Before beginning any work, the maintenance worker would need to de-energize the circuit and verify that it is de-energized using a voltage tester. The maintenance worker would also need to wear appropriate PPE such as insulated gloves and safety glasses. While working on the circuit, the maintenance worker would need to use insulated tools and maintain safe working distances from any energized parts. The maintenance worker would also need to be aware of the potential for electrical shock hazards and take steps to minimize the risk of shock. Thirdly, imagine a construction worker who is working near overhead power lines. The construction worker would need to maintain a safe distance from the power lines to avoid the risk of electrical contact. The specific safe working distance would depend on the voltage of the power lines. The construction worker would also need to be aware of the potential for arc flash hazards and take steps to minimize the risk of an arc flash. In all of these situations, it's important to remember that electrical safety is everyone's responsibility. Workers should be trained to recognize electrical hazards and to follow safe work practices. Employers should provide workers with the necessary PPE and training and should take steps to ensure that their workplaces are in compliance with all applicable standards and regulations. In addition to these examples, there are many other situations where NFPA 70E might be applied. The specific requirements and recommendations of the standard will vary depending on the specific hazards and conditions of the workplace. However, the overall goal is always the same: to protect workers from electrical hazards and to create a safer working environment. It is also worth noting that NFPA 70E is not intended to be a substitute for good engineering judgment. The standard provides guidelines and recommendations, but it is up to the qualified electrical worker to determine the best way to apply those guidelines and recommendations in a specific situation. In some cases, it may be necessary to go above and beyond the requirements of NFPA 70E to ensure that workers are adequately protected from electrical hazards. For example, a qualified electrical worker may choose to use additional PPE or to implement additional safe work practices, even if they are not specifically required by the standard. The ultimate goal is to create a safe working environment and to protect workers from electrical hazards. And of course, even the most comprehensive electrical safety program is only as good as the people who implement it. It is essential to foster a culture of safety in the workplace, where workers are encouraged to report hazards, ask questions, and take responsibility for their own safety and the safety of others. By working together, employers and employees can create a safer working environment and prevent electrical injuries and fatalities. Furthermore, let's break down a few key sections within NFPA 70E that are particularly relevant for understanding and implementing its guidelines. Firstly, Article 110 addresses the general requirements for electrical safety-related work practices. This section lays the groundwork for establishing a safe working environment and covers topics such as hazard identification, risk assessment, and the development of an electrical safety program. It emphasizes the importance of qualified persons being trained and competent in performing electrical tasks. Secondly, Article 130 focuses on work involving electrical hazards. This is where you'll find detailed requirements for working on or near energized electrical equipment. It covers topics such as establishing an electrically safe work condition, selecting appropriate PPE, and implementing safe work practices to minimize the risk of electric shock and arc flash. Thirdly, Article 205 delves into the requirements for personal protective equipment. This section provides guidance on selecting the appropriate PPE for various electrical tasks and voltage levels. It covers topics such as arc-rated clothing, insulated gloves, face shields, and footwear. It also emphasizes the importance of proper inspection, maintenance, and care of PPE to ensure its effectiveness. Fourthly, Annex E offers guidance on performing a risk assessment procedure. This annex provides a step-by-step process for identifying electrical hazards, assessing the risks associated with those hazards, and implementing control measures to minimize the risks. It emphasizes the importance of considering both the likelihood of occurrence and the potential severity of injury when assessing risks. Lastly, Annex R provides information on working with batteries and battery systems. This annex covers topics such as battery hazards, PPE requirements, and safe work practices for installing, maintaining, and servicing batteries and battery systems. It emphasizes the importance of following manufacturers' instructions and using appropriate tools and equipment when working with batteries. These are just a few of the key sections within NFPA 70E that are important for understanding and implementing its guidelines. By familiarizing yourself with these sections and others, you can develop a comprehensive electrical safety program that protects workers from electrical hazards and creates a safer working environment.